All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our discussion this month of Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams. I'm super excited to talk about this book. And if we just want to do quick introductions as usual, that would be awesome. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a librarian at AADL, and I do a lot of programming and also maintain the adult fiction and adult book on CD collections.
My name is Beth, and I'm a library technician on the outreach team of AADL.
My name is Lucy, and I'm a library technician in the youth department, and I do a lot of programming for kids and adults both.
Well, thanks, Lucy and Beth, for being here today. Just a quick, obviously the three of us have read this book, but if you're tuning in and you maybe haven't read or haven't finished it, Queenie is a fictional book, a novel set in London about a 25-year-old Black woman who works for a newspaper and is also experiencing a lot of personal troubles over the course of the book and ends up needing some mental health assistance. And it's just kind of about her journey over the course of about a year, battling some issues in her personal life and starting therapy, and well, we'll get into what happens at the end later. But I wanted to start out just by talking about Queenie herself. She is a pretty complex character, in my opinion. Like all of us, she has many positive traits, but also some negative ones, and it can be frustrating to read her story at times when it comes to her decision making. So I just wanted to hear what you both felt about Queenie, how you related to her or didn't relate, and what kind of you enjoyed or didn't enjoy about her fictional story throughout the novel.
There were a lot of times, like in the beginning, more in the middle of the book, where I was like, I don't know if I like Queenie right now. Like, she only ever, she's just, it's like, she seems very self-centered, and it was hard to like her in those moments. But I did read an interview where the author was like, I didn't set out to make her likable, I set out to make her real. So, and I do think that, like, once I got Queenie's whole story, her behavior made much more sense to me. So I found myself liking her in the end.
Yeah, I was more of the maternal, like, oh, honey, oh, my goodness, oh, bless your heart, this is not good. That was a lot of my, thought process. And then, yes, I thought it was really important that they revealed what her, the trauma that she had, and the pretty freaking bad too. I mean, I don't know how much of a spoiler we want to have, but she was neglected as a young child. So understandably, she has issues around that, and trust and all these things. But she was a real train wreck at the beginning.
I agree. And I actually ended up thinking it was really interesting how the author did it, because I really disliked her at the start of the book. I felt, because we didn't have her whole story. So I was like, what is the explanation for this? Like, how is she acting this way? Like, I was 25 not that long ago, and I didn't do this. And I don't think I'm like that amazing of a person, and it was just like, no, don't do this. Like, don't call that guy. Do not get in that car. Like, please, like, go back to your desk and do your work. Like, I was just like, kind of like looking through my fingers, like, oh no. But then I thought it was amazing how more of her story is revealed. It makes sense, her responses to some of the things she experiences, and it makes sense what she's going through. So I thought it was really a great writing. I ended up thinking over the course of the book, and how my feelings about her changed.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like in the beginning of the book, she kept saying, oh, like to her boyfriend that she was remembering back to, like, that's just my stuff. That's my, and I had these like little notes, like, what is this? What's her stuff? Like, why doesn't she like to be touched what, but she just referred to it as her stuff, and without learning what that stuff was. Like, we were getting hints that it was there, but I agree, Elizabeth, the way that the author told the story, sort of going back and forth in time, was really effective.
I also thought it was interesting just how there is humor in the book too, right? There are some funny scenes mixed in with some like pretty difficult ones to read, in my opinion, at least. And I thought that was a really great tactic by the author to have just have like it. Anytime something got really serious, she kind of balanced it out with some humor. Anytime something was, maybe making things too light, she kind of brought us back to reality in a way, I felt.
Yeah, I agree. I think that reflects reality in general too. That you can be going through some bad stuff, but you might still laugh at something. And you can be seen like on the outside, something's funny, but you're really going through some stuff. So, yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit also about Queenie's family. They kind of get revealed over the course of the book. Her grandparents are very strong characters who actually, to me, did lend a fair amount of humor to the story. Just they were funny a lot of the time. There is her mom, who she doesn't have a great relationship with as the book starts, but changes over the course of the book. Her aunt, and then her younger cousin too. And I thought those characters were just really interesting and well written. And I'd be interested to chat what you guys thought about the family characters too.
Well, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I liked the grandmother too, even though she was like, she seemed not very affectionate or anything, but then she would, kind of like in these moments, she was very much there. But she, I think, also lended a lot of the humor, like just the things that she would say, I thought were very funny.
The young cousin was one of my favorites too, Diana. She was very funny to me and just kind of lent some humor to situations. And, she could be a teenager, but was also kind of wise in her ways at times and gave Queenie some interesting advice, but also kind of poked fun at her for being old, even though she's not old. So she was one of my favorites too.
I think the grandmother was, against therapy and, there's a lot of family dynamics that they were wanting to adhere to, like, this is how we do it. And so it put pressure on Queenie to try to like be a more progressive person and try to take care of herself and and balance out what is acceptable from her family.
Definitely. And it seemed like for a little bit in the book, she was, maybe not going to go to therapy because it was so stigmatized in her family. And I was super relieved that she did, and super happy that it ended up being, something that the family came to accept too.
Yeah, it's almost like you need that. Someone needs to be the first, right? Even though it's like your family has never done this and the culture of your family doesn't make space for it. It's like the fact that Queenie persisted, she did, like everyone, you're right, what you're saying, Elizabeth, everyone kind of turned around in the end, but it's like someone's got to be that person who does the thing. So I'm glad that she did it.
Kind of shifting. Well, actually, no, let me skip to this question that kind of relates to that, is how much of the later part of the novel deals with mental health and kind of the stigmatization that still surrounds therapy, not just for Queenie's family, but I think a lot of people still, maybe feel that like, oh, I don't need therapy, or like look down on that. So I just wanted to talk about that portion of the book and how you thought that the author dealt with and described these issues, and just kind of what your thoughts were as you read about Queenie's breakdown and subsequent recovery and all that. I just, that took up most of the kind of last third of the book.
Well, I thought like the anxiety seemed to me to be such a debilitating thing for her. And I think it was portrayed in a way that was really understandable. And like, you were kind of going through it with her, like she's describing how she's feeling. And even as the reader, if you're able to say like, that's anxiety, I think it's just so realistic to be in the middle of a panic attack and not be able to recognize what it is. And so I thought that was just a big thing that she had to grapple with. And I thought it was portrayed in a way that was sensitive to it, but also very realistic.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, when she was really down, and some other things, like the way her grandmother was, Queenie was sounding like she wasn't getting the support she needed because her grandmother was making her do stuff, chores and things. But at first it seemed, as I was reading it, I was like, I thought it was a little harsh, but that reflecting back, it was really the way to get her on the road to recovery, to try and move forward. The therapy really made the difference, but again, like, even though she was perceiving it as not being helpful, her family or supportive, they really were, and they really, really care about her. And I really admired how close their family was.
I agree, Beth. And I felt like the author did a good job of kind of showing all the different, all the different things that might come into play when you're going through that kind of thing. Like, it's not necessarily just therapy that you need. There might also be like friend and family support and like rest. Also but also chores, like things to just like get you out of bed. It was just, the author did a really good job of kind of showing all the things that went into helping her move on the road to recovery, I felt.
Yeah, there's a really nice moment with her grandmother, who, like, as you were saying, Beth, seems to just be, like making her do chores and not supporting her therapy. But I think she gets like in bed to kind of hug or lie next to Queenie. And Queenie says something like, "Oh, I'm taking up too much space," or something. And she's like, "I've carried you your whole life. I can carry you now." And it just was like, okay, yeah, she's just doing it her way, but
her way. There's something that really struck me throughout the book, and I don't know if there's a question around it, but I'm just going to bring it up. And that was, it displayed the significance of your coworker friendships and your relationships with your coworkers, and really illustrated how folks from different backgrounds can still support each other and be very close, work friends and friends in general, and I've been in the workforce a very long time. So I have a lot of old friend coworkers, and just from so many different aspects of life and wide ranges of age differences. And, so I think it just really, I really liked how it showed the strength of coworkers' relationships.
I loved at the end when Queenie returns to work and the older woman who's been at the newspaper for a long time emails and just says like, "Welcome back," and just sends a nice message. And I loved that. And I think it shows, because Queenie had thought that she was, maybe kind of crabby, or like, didn't like her and her close friend like chatting all the time. But, it just shows like how you can have work relationships over different, with different people, and that, you might not at different levels, but you can have a lot of different positive work relationships, which is what you were saying, Beth. But I just like that moment when she came back and got that email.
Yeah. And recognizing, that, I mean, I forget what her name was, the other, Bobby? No,
Jean? Oh, Darcy.
Darcy. Darcy.
Dar-
Darcy.
no, the one that, Darcy, was that the one that she didn't get along with? That was Darcy?
Oh, no.
No.
Darcy's her
Oh,
like
that was her
best
good
friend.
friend. Darcy was a
Yeah.
good friend. The other
Yeah.
woman. But anyway, just like circling around to make things more positive, and yeah, and all ended pretty well for her. But you know, she went through some stuff. I was thinking with the guy, the Tweed guy, at first, you know, he seemed like he was really, I was like, oh, why are you pining for your old boyfriend when this new guy is like, seems really genuine? And well, he was a shit. And then also the doctor / character, I don't want to reveal too much, but I mean, that was her relationship with that guy was just like, that was another, you know, like, oh, honey, please don't let him treat you that way, you know?
Yeah, those were some of the harder scenes for me to read just because I was like, oh, don't do this. But I'm with you, Beth. When she first met Tweed guy, as she called him, I was like, oh, wait, like this seems like a great I didn't know where the book was going. So yeah, but you know, didn't work out, but that's okay.
No.
Yeah. And I think with both of those men, there's like a real issue of consent in different ways. I mean, obviously with the Welsh guy, like that was a really difficult scene to read, like the one where they're getting together in particular. And like, I think one of the most difficult things was it's that gray area of consent where she was like, well, I just said it felt nice, but it didn't, you know, it's like, she's not saying yes at all. And she's being used in a very, very, you know, disrespectful way. Even the guy in the car before that, you know, it's just, but then even like Tweed guy, I think he turns around and we know why he's just gross in the end. But there's like a moment where she's trying to say, no, I'm going to stay away from you. And he's like, you can't just decide that. And like grabs her hand, even though she's pulling it away. And just this constant, like, I can touch you. I can do this. I can grab you in big ways and small. And I thought that was so interesting. And also must like for someone like Queenie, who doesn't even really like to be touched, you know, I thought that was an interesting sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but I felt like consent was just, you know, right there under the surface for a lot of this.
And that was one thing that I felt like the author maybe didn't do, not that she has to, but I felt like that was kind of an unresolved issue throughout the book. And I never got the satisfaction that Queenie really, how do you say, like, I'm not positive that her attitude towards that changed. I'm hopeful, but like, I feel like we didn't get to that point necessarily fully towards the end of the book. And that was something that like kind of really bothered me throughout the book, how many times there were scenes or instances where she was like, well, I pretended to like it, or like, I guess it's fine, I'll just go with it so I can leave, or like things like that. And I did feel like that was left a bit unresolved. Like even towards the end, when she goes on the date with the guy that she's hopeful about, and like he goes to greet her and immediately like reaches down and touches her butt. Like she doesn't, you know, so I felt like that did bug me that wasn't resolved, but also she's a work in progress, as we all are. So like, you know, I just hope that's something that she was still going to work on, because that was just, yeah.
It seemed like from what I'm remembering, there was a lot of sort of objectifying, you know, on the part of the males, objectifying Black women, Black butts, you know, Black women's sizes. I mean, it was, and I think it was in there a lot because the writer probably experiences it a lot. And I think it just made it evident to us as the reader that like this is something that people are having to endure all the time, no matter how old you are either.
Yeah, that's that kind of fetishization.
Mm-hmm.
And Queenie's like in so many mostly white spaces, you know, and she's connecting with a lot of white men, I think in part because she said something about being scared of Black men, but because like her mother's experience, I can see why that would make her not stop the kind of rough treatment that she herself is getting, because she saw it happening to her mother. And even I think they talk about Roy like steering her mother by the shoulders, like, so it's not even just like I'm abusing you, like physically I'm hurting you, but I'm also physically like moving you around. And so if that's what you've grown up seeing, I don't even, that would be so hard to undo all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And Beth, to your point, actually one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to discuss was how the author captured the subtle and not subtle injustices that Black people, especially Black women, experience on a daily basis. And I just kind of want to talk about that for a bit. I mean, yes, there's the like physical touch, physical objectification that a lot of Queenie's dates put her through, but also, the author put in that scene of they're talking about an unarmed Black man being shot by police here in the US, and her best friend at work, who's like not fully listening, says, "Oh, what did he do?" And, Queenie says, "Well, nothing. That's the point." And I think the author put so many of those kind of short scenes in the book just to kind of capture how frequently Black people and Black women just experience that all the time.
Yeah, like in the doctor's office, even, it just keeps coming up. Like she's constantly being treated differently, or the questions that they ask her seem very geared towards like, I'm asking you this because you're a Black woman. And that's just like another microaggression being piled on all the others, in a place where you're supposed to be getting care.
Yeah.
I also thought, so this novel set in London, it's written by a British author. And I just wanted to ask what it was like for both of you to read about the events happening in the US from this kind of different lens. I know we can read the news, we can read other news sources and stuff, but I just thought it was pretty interesting, like from Queenie's perspective, the way she talks about the police killings of unarmed Black people, BLM protests, things like that. It was just an interesting lens for me to read through, because I'm so used to reading American news. And I just wondered what you all thought about that, or if you had any opinions.
Well, I was reminded during the summer of 2020 when, all the protests were happening around the world. I was really fascinated by what other folks in different countries were doing. And the most notable was some Australian Native folks, were doing some kind of Native dance kind of thing. But so as I read that, it made me reflect on some of that time and how it was news for the world, and significant because that stuff happens, I'm sure, in England too, in the UK.
I thought that, yeah, I agree, Beth. I guess I had forgotten that it is worldwide news because it happens here. So I just, and I was reading this as I was reading Queenie. I was like, oh, of course, like there were Black Lives Matter protests in London, but I was so focused on all of them happening here that I hadn't thought about it as much at the time. So it was just interesting for me to read from the lens from the UK. So as we know, we were supposed to have some more folks join us today. There was various scheduling and other personal conflicts that came up. So this discussion is going to be a little shorter, but I did want to ask just what you thought of the book and any final thoughts that we didn't get to talk about, and just anything else that the two of you might want to say before we close out.
I liked the book. I recommend it. And I always, I like to see what other cultures are up to. That's always intriguing for me. So in that perspective, one other thing though, thinking about the early time and all the sexual escapades, and like you had said, well, you're close to being that age yourself, not that long ago. And for me, it was way long ago. But and so like sexual behaviors are a lot different. And what I was thinking though at the time was like, are people still doing that? Are people still, doing that? Just like, so that's what I wondered. Is that a norm? Is that common? Maybe it depends on the age, the community, but I don't know.
I think every person is different. I think it depends on the age, community, and like who you are. I mean, I'm sure, like, I assure you people are doing that. I assure many 25-year-olds aren't, I think it's as many people as there are different approaches.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And Queenie's like, her sense of self-worth is so low that I'm not saying that means she would get into those situations. I just, but it just seems like that's where she ends up. Right. But one thing I wanted to say about the book is that, like, I feel like a lot of what you read about Queenie is they're saying, oh, it's the Black Bridget Jones's Diary. And that, first of all, it's not. And like, I don't know, I thought that was really, those comments are very reductive. And if you went into it thinking that, you would think you were getting something totally different. And I think that this book deals with a lot. And I'm not saying anything bad about Bridget Jones's Diary. I just think that they are vastly different. And one of the ways, it's kind of what you were talking about, Elizabeth, but for Queenie, like the daily microaggressions that she receives because she's a Black woman, and that just can't happen to Bridget Jones. But the other thing is, this book deals well with like trauma and miscarriage and gentrification and like police shootings, like you were saying. So I just think that if anyone who's watching this like sees that comment, to know that that is somewhat misleading.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I agree, Lucy, thank you for saying that. That just made me think that I shared on Instagram that I was reading this book in preparation for this discussion and said, has anyone read it? And I had two friends message. Okay. And I was about halfway through, and I was admittedly not loving it yet. I mean, I was recognizing that there were really good parts I felt like it was a well-written book, but I just personally was not enjoying it a lot, mostly because of the scenes with the lack of consent. I just felt like bad about. So I was just not like I just wasn't having like a nice time reading it. Not that you should have a nice time with everything you read. But both of the women who responded saying, oh, yes, I read it, both said, oh, I loved it. Like, so great. How are you liking it? And I responded back saying, well, I'm like not liking it that much. And they said that what was most powerful to them was the descriptions of like the honest description of like a mental breakdown, really bad things happening, and overcoming that with a like multitude of tools, including like therapy and all of that. And I came to agree with both of the women who messaged me, because I don't think you see that much in like, and not that there's not books that deal with mental illness, but just, I really appreciated like, she had pretty much a breakdown and like lost her job for a while and lost where she lived and had to like, luckily had family to support her and had to go do that. But like, she did not have a good time for a while and needed to work really hard to come out of that. And I appreciated that was like acknowledged really well in this book. And I ended up just feeling really appreciative of that, especially as a book about a Black woman, where even it talks about like that mental health and therapy can be stigmatized in many different Black cultures, And so I ended up really liking the second half of the book, like reading that. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that summation. Just that I was a little leery and hoped it wasn't gonna like end, just keep going downhill. And so I was glad she didn't, but she really went through some stuff. And And so for that, I really liked it too, just that it ended not in a neat package, but some things were resolved, and that she's a work in progress, like I think you said already. So just like we all are.
I'm not sure it would have been satisfactory if it ended with like this neat little bow tied up, like, and I'm fixed, because something that's been so realistic throughout, to do that would seem disingenuous. So
yeah, I agree. I was glad too that you could tell it was still going to take work, like that, because that's real. It's not, you don't just go to therapy and then get totally fixed. You are still working on that. So yeah. All right. Well, thanks to you both. I know it was a small group of us today, but it was great to chat with you about Queenie. And Lucy, you may know, I believe our next discussion is Akata Witch. Is that?
It is, yes.
Okay, great. So that will be our next discussion for those of you who tune into this series. That's what we'll be talking about next. And thanks very much for listening if you listened in.